Hey guys, we're back with a new video about getting started with the D45, the Intel RealSense Depth Camera. In today's video we'll talk a bit about the technology behind the camera, and we'll also be installing necessary software to get started with the camera. We'll be installing ROS, which stands for Robot Operating System. We will also be installing the SDK and the ROS Wrapper for Intel's RealSense devices. So before we start with the installation phase, I just wanted to talk a bit about how the camera works and briefly give an explanation about the technology used to capture depth. So as I mentioned, the D45 is a depth camera and it manages to capture depth using stereo vision. So on the camera we have two imagers, one on the left and one on the right, and both imagers capture the scene and they send raw image data to the vision processor, which correlates the points between both images or analyzes the differences between both images. And through this process it can generate a depth image or a depth frame. Alright, let's start installing the software that we mentioned before. We'll be first installing ROS Melodic because we're using Ubuntu 18. However, if you're using Ubuntu 16 or Ubuntu 20, you should install different versions of ROS. For Ubuntu 16, you should be installing ROS Kinetic, and for Ubuntu 20, you should be installing ROS Noetic. However, we're using Ubuntu 18, that's why we'll work with the Melodic. We'll be installing the full desktop version and follow the next steps to install ROS. First, we will configure our Ubuntu repositories to allow universe, multiverse, and restricted using these commands. The next step is to set up our computer to accept software from packages.ros.org. We will then register the server's public keys. If you get a network error at this step, make sure that you're connected to your company's network, as the firewall might be blocking the requested URL. Then we will run sudo apt update and install the full desktop version of ROS. You can install the normal desktop version if you have limited space or if you're having trouble installing the full desktop version. Lastly, we will set up the environment variables to be automatically added to your bash session every time a new shell is launched, and install dependencies for building ROS packages. Now that ROS Melodic is installed, we will proceed with installing the Intel RealSense SDK 2.0. The SDK is a cross-platform library for the RealSense depth cameras. It provides intrinsic and extrinsic calibration information, depth and color streaming, as well as synthetic streams, such as point cloud, depth aligned to color, and vice versa. To install the SDK, unplug any connected Intel RealSense cameras and follow these steps. First, update your Ubuntu distribution and get the latest stable kernel. Then download or clone the libRealSense GitHub repository. Navigate to the libRealSense root directory and install core and distribution specific packages. Now run the permission script setup_udev_rules.sh. The next step will be to build and apply patched kernel modules. We will then create a build directory and navigate to this directory. Next, we will run cmake with examples set to true. This builds libRealSense along with demos and tutorials. Finally, we will recompile and install libRealSense binaries. Now that the SDK is installed, we will move on to install the ROS Wrapper for Intel RealSense devices. These are packages that enable you to use the RealSense Depth Cameras with ROS. For installation, launch a new terminal and perform the following steps. First, we will create a Catkin workspace and navigate to the source directory. Next, clone the latest RealSense ROS into the source directory. And now we will initialize a Catkin workspace and start building packages using the catkin_make command. If you get a cmake error, make sure ddynamic reconfigure is installed. We will then set up the environment variables in the .bashic file like we previously did while installing ROS Melodic. And now let's start testing the software we installed. The first example is to generate a point cloud. Plug in your camera and launch a terminal. Execute the following command, then launch a new terminal and type in RViz. Once RViz is up and running, do the following steps. First, change the fixed frame to camera link. Then, click the Add button and the settings menu should appear. Click on the By Topic tab. Under Color, then Image Draw, double-click on Image. And then, under Depth, then Color, then Points, double-click on Point Cloud 2. Finally, click on OK, and now you should be able to see the point cloud. The second example and last step of this tutorial would be to open the RealSense viewer. Launch a new terminal and type RealSense-viewer and the viewer should open. Thank you very much for listening. For more details, visit the Mouser website. The link to the tutorial is in the description below. If you like the video and want to stay up to date with more tutorials, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the thumbs up button.